Well, good afternoon and welcome to the live recording of the e-commerce podcast. Almost caught me on unawares there. As people are gathering in, do say hi in the comments. Be great to know where you're watching from. I just need to make a quick setting change on my computer here. Copy. Trying to multitask. Let me explain to you what's going on. We are doing the live recording of our e-commerce podcast. And today we've got an amazing guest, a fellow Brit, which I'm very excited about. We've got a guy called Mike Jones coming on, who's actually in the army for 18 months. Yes, 18 months. Definitely longer than that. 18 years. So we are going to get in strategy and leadership in this podcast. I'm super excited. We started the conversation a few minutes ago, and so I'm really keen to get into it, that's for sure. So the way this works is Mike is busy in the background waiting that we bring him on. We are going to be doing a live recording of the e-commerce podcast. Okay, so that's how we do it. We just record it in one take, and we live stream the recording of that podcast. So this is the live stream of the podcast recording. So welcome to you if you are a regular to the show, and all that good stuff. It's great that you're here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to roll the intro, the music, you'll hear the music play, and then I'll do the introduction to the podcast. We're recording at that point. I'm going to bring in Mike and we're going to have a conversation. So do stick around because you are going to love this one. Yes, you are. It's going to be great. So hopefully I have explained myself clearly and concisely. So here we go with the live recording of the e-commerce podcast. Let's do this.
Welcome to the e-commerce podcast with Matt Edmondson, a show that brings you regular interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.
Well, hello and welcome to the e-commerce podcast with me, your host, Matt Edmondson. Whether you are just starting out or whether, if you're like me, you've been around the world of e-commerce for a while, it's great that you're here. The aim of this show is simple. It's just to help you grow your e-commerce and digital businesses because we all love doing business online. Yes, we do. And every week to do this, I simply talk to amazing people from around the world and get to ask them all kinds of questions about what they know and specifically how it's going to help us develop our own business, our own online businesses. I try and have the conversation that you would have if you get to sit down and have a coffee with this person. Okay, I dig into their story, we get to ask questions, we learn principles that can help us start and adapt and grow online. Yes, we do. So that's what the show is all about. I love doing them. I genuinely do. It's a great way of networking. It's a great way to meet people. And if you enjoy the show, if you're regular to the show and you haven't done so already, I would appreciate it if you just give us a review on iTunes. If you listen to it, if you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook, give us a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and all that good stuff. And if you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, you can also watch the video version of it as well over on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page. And all of the links to today's show, all of the notes, the transcripts, everything, including the links to YouTube, Facebook, Apple iTunes, all those things where you can get the podcast are available for you at ecommercepodcast.net/71 because this is episode number 71. Yes, it is. So just head on over to ecommercepodcast.net/71 and you can get access to all that good stuff. Okay, on this week's podcast, we are going to be talking about why you should marry your business to a strategy and how the money will follow when you do. Yes, we are talking strategy, we are talking leadership. And if you are an entrepreneur looking for more profit, or any company leader who wants less risk in their business, then this, let me tell you, is definitely for you. So grab your notebooks as I get to chat with Mike Jones about this whole whole topic. And let me tell you about Mike. He is an experienced leader, let's say. He's an organizational psychologist, which is not actually that easy to say. He understands the need to unlock potential of leaders, teams, and organizations to help them overcome the complexity and the volatility of modern business. Mike's leadership skills and knowledge are grounded in an 18-year career in the British Army. Yes, that's right. He was in the British Army for 18 years, which I am super excited about to talk to him, where he served actually in Afghanistan and Iraq, leading troops in very complex and hostile environments. And it was this experience, as I'm sure you can appreciate, that gave him a real understanding that only when your people are empowered, engaged, and aligned around your clear mission can your team achieve its full potential. Accompanied by his studies to become an organizational psychologist, it has given Mike an exceptional background in leadership strategy and creating the right cultural environments for people, teams, and organizations to thrive. In other words, he's a great guy to talk to about this whole topic. So I'm going to bring him in. Let's bring him into the show. Mike, great to see you. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Matt. Really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Yeah, no, it's great to have you here. But I love the show. I love all the people that we meet around the world. But I always love to talk to a fellow Brit. It's always nice on the podcast circuit to get a hold of the British guys. That's for sure. So whereabouts in Britain are you?
Currently in sunny Milton Keynes.
And is it actually sunny, or is it grey and overcast like it is here in Liverpool?
Yeah, very grey and overcast.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
I was on a virtual thing with organisation up north today, and so I just like to lie to them, say it's nice and sunny down here.
Just to wind people in the north up. It's what, if you're listening to the show and you're going, what are you talking about? In England, this is what happens. The people in the south like to wind up the people in the north about how much better the weather is in the south than it is in the north, which generally is quite true. There's normally at least a few degrees better weather down south. And so that's what we are talking about for anyone outside of the British Isles. But I'm pleased to know that you're experiencing the same weather that I am today.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it is what it is. So how long have you been in Milton Keynes?
I'd settled here after I left the army, so probably about coming up to 4 years now. 3 to 4 years. Time flies so fast, doesn't it? I forget years. But I pretty much settled down here. I'm not originally from here. I'm originally from Oxford. But when I joined the army, you sort of leave your home, and then when you leave, you sort of migrate to somewhere that you fancied, and I sort of just fancied come to Milton Keynes. I quite like the area.
I have to be honest, it's not the first. That's probably, well, actually, it is the first time anyone has ever said someone has liked the area of Milton Keynes to me. Just
it's Marmite, it is.
You must like concrete. So you were in the army for 18 years. What made you decide to sign up?
Oh, I really wish it was noble reasons, like I wanted to serve my country and all those. But unfortunately, not. There was a part of me, because my dad was in the army. So I had that sort of natural attraction to it anyway. But really, I didn't have much options. I didn't do very well at school. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I saw the army as an opportunity to sort of get away and give me opportunities that I don't think I necessarily would have had if I stayed around where I was.
Yeah. And did you enjoy it? Or did you endure it?
No, I loved it. I honestly, if you met me before I joined the army, you would have thought, Mike, you are not going in the army. You are not suited for it. I was quite unfit. I was quite tubby. Well, I'm saying it now, but I'm a civvy, so I've got probably a few pounds.
A few civvy pounds. Yeah.
yeah. But I just wasn't. I wasn't your typical person that would go into the army. But I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved the challenge of it. I love the fact that I found the army quite simple in a way. That, do you know what? If you wanted to do really well and excel in the army, you just have to listen and apply yourself. and it really is that simple. People talk about there's a lot of rubbish and stuff with the army, the discipline and all that lot. But once you get over that and just, you know what, you told me to do this, I'll go do that, and that's fine. You can really excel and create opportunities wouldn't necessarily be available to you.
Is that what you found for yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. All the way through, you have loads of choices really in the army. So you can go just do day to day and do that. You have to do 4 years minimum, but after that you've got loads of opportunity. If you want to go for promotion, there's nothing really stopping you. You just got to go on the courses, put yourself forward in the courses and do really well and keep yourself fit and go there. If you wanted to go do anything really, the army, where I am now, and the education I've got is through the army and my experiences in the army. Without that, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to become an organisational psychologist.
So was it in the army that you did the whole organisational psychology training?
No, not. It's because of the army. So there was a lot of instances in Afghan and Iraq that made me really ponder this question, and I didn't quite understand it. Was why do people follow you because they want to, not because they have to? I noticed when we were going into really difficult situations, there was a very, very big difference between people that were just doing what they told and people that actually had felt a shared ownership and felt that they were really part of something and they were trying to help you. And I really wanted to know what that was. So after some difficult tours, I remember coming back and I think I was about 27 when I read my first proper book. That's quite bad saying that, but yeah, it's true.
Wow.
Yeah, you could spell fudge with my GCSEs. So I came back and I wanted to discover about leadership. Why is this? And I started reading some normal generic books on leadership, and then that got me onto psychology. So I started reading about cognitive psychology and taught myself around cognitive psychology. And then I found this whole fascinating area around occupational psychology or organisational psychology. But and at this time, I'd unfortunately been diagnosed with complex PTSD. So I was getting pretty much told that I can't be a soldier anymore, which was absolutely devastating, because you imagine it's everything even though I originally joined for not real noble reasons, it was just a place to go. I really found a purpose in the army. And if you spoke to anyone, I was going to be there for till I was old and crusty and couldn't walk anymore, and they've had to get rid of me that way. But because of that, I had no education to go really do anything, but I had a great passion. So I wrote to a load of universities, or emailed nowadays,
Yeah.
and asked them that I've got no education, but I've got real passion. Can I come on your courses? A lot of them said no, but a few of them gave me a chance, and and then eventually went through the interview process. So I really found a connection with Wolverhampton University. They're really supportive, and they let me come on their master's course, become a psychologist, which I'm really grateful that they gave me that opportunity, and I've not looked back since.
Wow. So 18 years in the army. Did you go in as an officer?
No. I went as
what's that phrase? No, I earn my living, or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. I work for a living, and I went in as a private soldier, and I left just before I left. I promoted to Sergeant Major. So I worked my way up. I've done in that 18 years. My intention was always to go to regimental Sergeant Major, which is a top soldier rank, and then commission to be an officer. But now I very much joined as the soldier. But I was fortunate enough to be selected to teach at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst to train the officers. We're one of the only armies where the soldiers teach the officers to become officers.
That's really intriguing. Why do we do that?
I think it's the experience.
Mm.
We have officers with us, so every platoon would have a colour sergeant or staff sergeant, and then a platoon commander. But really, it's the experience that the soldiers have, the leadership that they've been brought up from the day as they brought up with the day that they join the army. Leadership is very much the thing it's spoken about. It's embraced that everyone is an individual leader, and then we build that leadership up. So I think it really is that greater context that a soldier can give, because you think by the time they're there, they've done 16 years in the army, vast amount of experience.
So and again, for those that don't know, Sandhurst is how do you describe Sandhurst for someone that doesn't know what it is?
Sandhurst is the Royal Military Academy. It's the home place, the home of our British Army leadership, and it's where all the potential officers come to train over a year course to become junior officers in the British Army. It's one that's always pushing the bounds of really discovering what leadership is, and creating the future leaders of the British Army. So it's a very integral part to the army. Yeah.
So teaching them must have been quite. I don't know. You must have been quite proud. I don't know a better way to describe it, but it's I'm at Sandhurst. I'm proud I'm at Sandhurst, kind of a deal.
Oh yeah, it's huge, and I don't think it really sunk in when I was there until that moment where you're on the square, the parade square, as the commissioning course.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you would have been with you, brother. And it's the next to Trooping of the Colour. It's the second biggest parade in the British Army does, and it's fantastic. And you see in these young officer cadets that you brought in from day one, and really moulded them in, giving them the confidence and the abilities to then go away to lead soldiers anywhere in the world. That's a big answer for anyone.
That's really interesting. Do you find, and there's a reason I'm asking this question, it's not a loaded question, it's going to tie into what we're talking about. Who makes the best kind of leader? Is it someone that comes into Sandhurst, say, straight from uni, or is it someone like yourself that's kind of works their way up the ranks and then they want and go and get their commission? So they start off as a soldier and then they go get their commission. Which one do you see, or maybe it's just too generic a question, I don't know, but is there a pattern which says actually the best kind of leaders come from this?
I think it's different type of leader from there. There's two the same. I think if you're looking at it, you can go either route and have completely different outcomes. But really, it's I think it's the mindset that you go in on those. And I think the one distinguishing factor that helps someone is a leader that can display humility.
Okay.
And I think that's what makes the difference in that scenario, where someone is willing to listen and understand, and to have that humility to be aware of their own strengths and limitations within the context that they're operating. Because we know it's different what context you are, your strengths and your limitations are going to change. But I've always found that going through, because I trained soldiers as well, so I was at Purbright as an instructor, so I trained soldiers to become or young boys and girls to become soldiers. And it's the one thing that's always stuck out is the ones that are willing to apply themselves and have the humility to learn and listen.
That's really interesting. So humility, and it's interesting, these characteristics they've not changed, have they, over the years? It's not like, the good leaders now are the ones that can write computer code, or do you know what I mean? It's as the world has changed, the principles have remained the same. It's humility and a willingness to apply yourself. I mean, it's kind of like,
I think in the world of leadership and stuff like that, we all get ourselves modelled up around what is leadership, and a leader's born or made, and you can tie yourself in knots, because if you search like what is a leader, there's a million definitions. I don't think we're ever going to come to a conclusion. But really, it's not changed evolutionary from. Well, you've got to look at the premise of what a leader is. Really, it's about someone that can get a group of people or a team to follow them to achieve a shared objective. And all those things. It's that when we talk about leadership, it's that emotional connection, that human connection. It's about inspiring them. It's about being very clear and being able to get people to follow to achieve the objective you're going to. And then we muddle it further with management, and we're like, oh well, you're a manager or a leader. Well, no, it's a balance, because in leadership, without a balance of management, you've got really inspired people who are ready to achieve things, but they haven't got the resources or support or tools to achieve what you want them to do. So yeah, I think people get themselves overly caught up and tied up in knots around these things, but I think it's about keeping it simple. And in an organisation, I think it's very being clear. Actually, what do you define as a leader? What type of leader? What principles of leadership do you really need to work in the context that you're operating in?
That's really, really powerful stuff. So a leader is someone that gets people or a team to follow them towards a shared objective, which I think is, and we should get into this whole topic because, I mean, we're talking about strategy. The whole title is, marry up your business to a strategy. So is that what you mean when you say, when we talk about the importance of a business strategy? Let's get into that. So how does that fit in with strategy? What is a strategy? It's probably a great question to start with.
Yeah, this is where it gets people have got. So if you look at traditional view of strategy, what people do, and I had this argument very much today, discussion, not argument, about leadership, about strategy. People go beyond thinking it's all about a vision and objectives and stuff like that. But strategy is choices.
Okay.
And I think the thing with leadership and all those, people want that there's a right or wrong answer. You're either right or wrong. You're trying to deduct it into two simple things, but it's not. Strategy and leadership is all about choices. And strategy, when we look at it, is really about choices around what is it that you're trying to achieve? What really is it that you are trying to win at? And strategy came from military and how we've done things. And that really came down to a simple choice around where can we best position ourselves in this vast open area that we've got available to us that would give us the maximum competitive advantage to win. Now turn that into business day and not in the military terms, it's pretty much the same. What are we trying to win at? And what you normally find is that businesses are focused on, oh, well, I done this last year, so let's, double that, and that's what we're going to do this year. Which really isn't maybe not the best strategy if you look at the rest of the marketplace that they're in, or the segment that they're in, and you think, well, they made $250,000 last year with X amount of sales, and that might sound good. So looking at doubling it and doing that the next year maybe sound like a good strategy. But then you look at the rest of the industry, and the industry actually made 5.5 million, X amount of sales in what they were doing. So actually, you think, well, your strategy really is to basically try and do a tenth of what the potential of that market is. So it's not really good. So come to it about what strategy is. Strategy is a set of choices about what are you trying to win at. Where is best in this marketplace, especially with e-commerce. E-commerce is a vast growing industry with relatively easy penetration into the market. Really relative that you don't need that much capital and resources in a way. You're only you're only two guys in a garage away from disrupting the place. So it's really about looking at where is best for you to what are you trying to win at? Where is best for you to play at? And really, what can you do to get maximum competitive advantage? So it's just about choices.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So strategy then is about choices, and I love the question, and I've written it down. What are we trying to win at? So how do we, if I take a step back, how do we know what we should try and win at then? Do you know what I mean? If it's not just a case of, oh, let's increase our turnover or our profit, which is what everybody says, and it's very, I'll agree with you here, Mike. It's dull, it's boring, it's not very inspiring, and the only person that ever cares about you doubling your turnover is the guy that said it in the first place, right? And you can just see everybody's eyes as, you know, when you say, we want double our turnover, everyone around the company, their eyes just glaze over, because it just becomes about numbers and making somebody maybe over there slightly wealthier, which is just not inspiring, right? So how do we determine what is a good thing to win at, if that makes sense?
That's a good question, and it depends, right? It depends on what you want, but really, I'm a big believer in about having that clear, unambiguous purpose for the organisation, and I think that's the first stepping stone into that. Having that clear purpose, organisational purpose that really states what do you do and why does it matter? Because organisations and companies are created because there is a need, and you have identified that need, and you have created your organisation to fill that need, to serve people. So it's about really understanding what your purpose is, and that's the first step in it. And then I'm a big advocate around having great foresight. So once you understand your purpose, you start eliminating what you do, and also, more importantly, what you don't do. And that's a good thing for about strategy. It actually should be very much as it's detailing explicitly what you do or what you want to do. It should really indicate what you don't do. So who aren't your customers, effectively? And then once you have that, have great foresight. Have a look at the industry, and what are those driving forces in your contextual environment? So we call it scenario planning. So really looking forward to seeing what are those key changes, those weak signals that are happening in your market segmentation in the next, I don't know, anything from 10 to maybe, I wouldn't suggest going beyond 35 years, because it becomes a bit crazy.
To be fair, anything over sort of 35 days, I think most e-commerce entrepreneurs are just like, what? Or maybe 35 months. Maybe that's a little bit fairer. But
that's the thing. So it all depends really on your organisation. So we look at e-commerce as quite a volatile environment, we'd call it. So actually your foresight would be a bit narrower, because what you want to really build is agility. So that really to respond, to be able to relearn, reorganize, adapt to the shifts in your contextual environment.
Yeah.
So, so you probably have a shorter outlook on life, but it's really thinking about where are the opportunities there, and then also it's thinking about where are the gaps. So traditionally, people look at strategy and it's quite competitive, and you go, do you know what? And you probably see this in e-commerce world. You've got a lot of duplication. You've got a lot of people trying to go for the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's what strategy used to be. It used to be, right, force on force. You're doing that, so I'm going to try and do that faster and quicker than you. And then what we've learned is that just leads to the race to the bottom, right? The only way to compete would be to go cheaper.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is actually look at the area that you want to play in, and think about actually where is that unique differentiation that we could get value from, that the needs not being met, and it's looking there, and how can you create value in there. I think that's
great.
Where you're looking at.
So what are you trying to win at? I love that phrase, be clear on your unambiguous purpose. I don't know if you trademark that phrase, but you probably should, because somebody somewhere listening to the show is going to go, well, that sounds like a great book title. I'm going to write a book called Unambiguous Purpose. So I think it's a great phrase. So we understand strategy is about choices. What is it we want to win at? Being clear on our purpose. I've made some notes here. Great foresight. What we do, what we don't do. Understanding our marketplace, finding those gaps. And it all sounds great, but why do you think this is important? Why do you think it's important to create this kind of strategy?
I think it's important to look at where you can continue to add value that is not going head-on-head competition. So you've got loads of options available to you. You can look at partnerships in that sense, if that's the way you want to go to, because you can create great value from aligning two businesses, similar one, to create new value. But if you look the e-commerce world, I think where I looked last a while back is, I think by 2040, 95% of purchases are going to be made online.
Wow.
Well, and that's huge, isn't it? So the growth is massive. So the amount of competition and people trying to get into that space is going to be huge. And you've got your giants, haven't you? You've got your Amazon. So you're not going to go and compete against the likes of Amazon. They'll swallow you up. You're not going to get that capital, that investment, that innovation, unless you do decide to partner up and you can share that risk of capital and innovation. You do that. So I think it's about looking at what options are there, and it's not looking at going, I can either go this one or that one, and basically suffering a mediocre option of, one's a pretty poor option and one's slightly better option. It's about asking those really difficult questions of the marketplace and really think about actually what do we want to win at. And I think that's key as well. I keep saying win, and people will roll their eyes when they say about win, but that's really what it is, isn't it? It's about it's strategy is about winning. But it's being really,
if you roll your eyes at it, you're probably in the wrong business, to be fair.
And then it's really looking and delving back in there. And strategy should be fun. It should be an iterative process. You should be looking at it and thinking, okay, well, let's look at this. What can we do? What could give us the maximum value? What is the need in that market space that's not being met? And then thinking about, okay, if you've identified that, and then looking at actually what would need to be true for us to meet that need. And it might be that we just don't have the capability or the expertise or something to meet that need. So we go back and we ask better questions.
Yeah.
Find that.
That's really interesting. I do love these conversations about strategy. We put out one of the questions that we've been asked, and I'll throw this out to you, is I'm thinking about the guy that's maybe starting his e-commerce business up, right? So, it's sort of early doors. The question that came was, do you need a business plan before you implement your strategy? Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, business plan comes, in my opinion, business plan comes afterwards. And I think this is what removes the sort of creative thinking around when it comes to strategy, because you want to go it with a fresh pair of eyes. And I'll never recommend trying to do strategy on your own. I'd get diverse people around you to look at it at different angles and really explore that. And a business plan really comes afterwards, because what you're essentially saying is, right, okay, so I'm very clear on my strategy. I know exactly what I want to win at. I know where I'm going to go, the channels that I'm going to reach the customer by, and how I'm going to reach them. And then when you do, you look at knowing that information, that's your future state. then you've got to be really self-aware, which is another key thing for a leader and an organisation, is look at what's your current state. And that gap then becomes your business plan. And that's that activity then, those if an organisation, that's your change programs, that's your priorities to get yourself from your current state to your future state, because you know that future state will give you the competitive advantage in that environment you operate in.
Wow. Okay. Now I'm just thinking, you said there, don't create the strategy by yourself. So if you're starting out in business, or you're just you're doing it as a side hustle, or you're by yourself, does that mean strategy is beyond your reach as a single person, or how would you do that if you were by yourself? As I know a lot of people are.
Yeah, it's not out your reach. You can do it. It's just that we're human, right? We're finite. We look through things in our own little world, and definitely when you're an entrepreneur, you can think you've got the greatest idea in the world, and you've got that confirmation.
I've always got those, Mike. I'm not going to lie. They're always the best ideas in the world. Yeah,
exactly. But we've all got, and we should have, especially in being a leader, we should have that network around us. Those good people, those experienced people, and don't be afraid to reach out and get people involved in exploring strategy with you, to make sure that you get it right. And I say get it right, that you've made the best choices.
How would you, what if you were by yourself starting out, then what kind of people would you look for? Or is that a question that depends on, you talked about being self-aware as a leader. So do you go, okay, I'm not great at this, and this, so I'm going to find someone that's got some ideas in these areas and get them to input on what I'm trying to do? Or is it just a case of, actually, there's just 3 or 4 key people you need to go and connect with, regardless of whether I'm good at it or not?
Yeah, I think ideally I'd look at people that are probably a bit more cognitive diverse to you. So people, because the great thing around strategy is perception and frames. We want frames, so everyone's got a different frame of how they look at things. And what we don't want is a group of people with the same frame look at the same problem, because you're going to get the same answer. So I'd get those people that are a bit different to you. I think Shell calls them those beautiful people that probably have got no experience in that organisation that you're in, but can stand back and give that really objective view. So I think the more different frames you can have looking at a problem, and the better you can articulate your questions looking in there, I think that would be a good start.
Okay, so very helpful. So a strategy then, what am I looking for at the end of this process in terms of, is it like a 1-page document I'm trying to create? Is it like a 40-page novel? what am I trying to create in this process, if I can put it that way?
Ideally, it's all about, like I said, it's all about choices. Being very clear. Where I see that strategy just is best intentions is when I see it's over 5 pages beyond. I've seen strategy documents that are like 140 pages long. You're like, come on, and I've seen
those and I never read them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the problem that causes great friction, and that doesn't happen. And I've seen strategy with things like we're going to treat our customers really well. Well, cheers for stating the obvious. Of course we are. You know what I mean? So ideally, you want a page, no more than 5 pages, because no one's going to read that more. A page of clearly just simple, clear of those things, like what are you going after? How are you going after it? And where are you going to go after it? I think those really key things. You got to look at what are the capabilities that we need to be able to do that.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down. So what are you going after? How are you going to get it? And what was the third one? What's the route you're going to take to get there?
Yeah, or where you're going to go to go.
Where?
So basically, if you imagine our marketplace, the e-commerce is vast, isn't it? It's like a vast plane. But then within there, they've got loads of different segmentations that you can have. So it's about, in that vast place, what area are you going to go to, and really break it down into there, because otherwise you're trying to do too much. You're trying to appease too many people.
Yeah.
And it's about really who are your customers, and who are not your customers.
So how do you go about communicating this strategy? Because I mean, if I go back to what you said at the start, right? So a leader is someone that has a team follow them towards a shared objective. How do you do that? How do you get people inspired with your strategy? How do you communicate it in a way that enables people to follow you?
Yeah, great point, and that is really key. And where you see a lot of friction happening is because the direction towards a strategy is so ambiguous. It creates diversions. So when divergence exists, that's when people start opening up their own wills and agenda and start following their own thing. So I think the key to it is to keep it. I say keep it simple, not simple in the sense that you're trying to dumb down something very complex, but be very clear in what you're saying. And once you can be very clear and ambiguous about what you're trying to do in those questions, I always think it's really good to get back their understanding, their interpretation of actually what you're asking them to do. And it's allowing them to understand their choices in that. So as we go down the organisation, we're not going through this really long list of to-dos and not to-dos. It's been very clear about what we're trying to achieve as a whole, and then making that very clear, allowing them to read back their understanding interpretation, so we minimise that misinformation transfer, and then leaving it to them to understand about their choices. This presents them. So if you think about you've got your winning aspiration, which is to, I don't know, to be the number one in. God, I'm put on the spot now, trying to think of a winning aspiration for the e-commerce world. But it could be the fact that you want to be the number one in e-commerce market for baby goods or something. I don't know. And actually, your capability is going to be around agility, customer agility, understanding the needs, and understanding and anticipating the needs of your customer. Then if you go down to the customer service, you don't have to go into detail and show them exactly what they've got to do or how they're going to do it. You just communicate it very clear and succinct what we're trying to win at, the where we're going to play at, how we're going to do it, how we're going to reach people, and then allow the choices for them. So they get to their part and they're going, okay, so if that's what their intent is for us, how can we make that true? And I think it's keeping it very simple.
So you're talking there about autonomy, aren't you? The way I'm hearing what you're saying, Mike, is actually you create a strategy that people understand. It's clear, it's compelling, but it allows the leaders in your organization, which at this point in time may only be you, but let's assume your business is going to grow. It's going to allow those to be autonomous in that area in achieving that objective.
Yeah, in a true sense. I think autonomy, or what we call it in the Army, mission command, is probably one of the most most overused words, but most misunderstood.
Yeah. Because
I always go into an organisation, they go, well, Mike, our people are empowered, Mike. Of course they are. I've told them they're empowered. And I'm like, all right, okay. But to be truly empowered, there's really three main things need to be true. And that one is the first one is to have clear understanding of your the organisation's intent or strategy. So, and what part you play in it. So you must understand what your organisation is trying to achieve and what part you play into that. The other part is your constraints. So, God love it, everyone has constraints. Even the CEO of Audi has constraints, and it's understanding your constraints gives you your freedoms. And then the third element is competence in your role. That you are competent in that role to do it. So, if something is to happen and to change, and you've got a shift in what's happened, something's gone horribly wrong, by understanding the intent and your part to play in it, and then understanding your constraints, you know what you can do to adapt in line with what the organisation is trying to achieve.
Wow, that's really good. So yeah, and I love the phrase mission. What did you call it? Missional command. Mission command.
Mission command, yeah.
That's much better than autonomy.
Yeah, I like it.
It's very British Army. We have mission command. We have mission command. So on a practical basis, right, on a practical day-to-day basis, what do you do with your strategy? You've got your document, you've got, you know, as your organization's grown, people have got the mission command. How practically on a day-to-day basis are you managing this strategy?
So it should start. So if you do it properly, when you start the thing where you have that foresight, like we talked about, you really understand the contextual environment and the transaction environment you're coming in. You then understand the strategy. So you've clearly identified, like we said, what you're going to win at, where you're going to do it, etc. All that stuff to form that strategy. Really, in the part of doing that, and this is different. So it could be a large organisation, or you could be a very small team. It's that process starts that conversation because you've involved people in that. You started that conversation. You start to create that shared consciousness around what the organisation is trying to achieve. So it should be something that should be an ongoing conversation. Strategy forms what we call the decision-making framework. Mm-hmm. Because, like I said, you've only presented with choices. So as things change, as things come up, you should be using your strategy as a framework to make choices and decisions. So it should be practically there on a day-to-day conversational basis around that. But organisationally, the strategy should be aligned to the organisation, or the organisation should be aligned to the strategy. And we call that strategic alignment. And it's very important for any organisation, no matter what industry, size, sector, whatever, to make sure they're strategically aligned to ensure that you can best be competitive in the strategy that you've made. Mm-hmm. So we look at, it starts off with purpose, our strategy, so what we're trying to win at, our core capabilities, so what actually do we need to be good at to win? That could be innovation, it could be cost minimization, logistics, it could be anything that you need to be good at to win. Then we look at your architecture, so your culture, and this is the old argument you've probably heard: strategy eats culture eats strategy
for breakfast. Yeah.
Load rubbish, absolutely load rubbish.
That's a really interesting. Why do you say it's a load of rubbish?
Because they should be mutually supporting. Mm. So there's no point in having a culture that is really curative and quite free and open and not really autonomous, when actually your strategy is about efficiency. Mm. It's all about look at McDonald's; they're all about efficiency. Last thing you want is the guy on the burger station to start thinking, do you know what? I think I can do this a lot better. Actually, I'm going to move that over there because it's right, and we should open, no matter what industry you're in, you should have that place where an employee can suggest and do that. But the whole thing with efficiency is that no matter what McDonald's you go in the world is exactly the same, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get any other experience than you do. It's the exact same experience. I get the same burger as you. And that's the same. If you're looking at Google or Amazon or something like that, there's no point in for them having their strategy around partnerships and creativity and innovation to then have a culture which is all about hierarchy. It's all about discipline. It's all about efficiency. They won't match. So they have to be mutually supportive. So the culture has to be designed to best enable you to achieve your strategy, not the other way around.
Wow. Okay. So you talked about then obviously knowing, your what it is that you want to win at. You talked about knowing your core capabilities. You talked about the architecture and what you called culture. Is there anything else that we need to think about on your list?
Yeah. So under architecture, you still got leadership, structure, and sort of processes. How you about your work, and then the final one is your management systems. So your IT management systems, your performance management systems, how you finance, all those things have to be aligned. They have to be mutually supported, and it's a thing about going back and checking those to make sure that you're not getting a misalignment. So what you tend to find, and this has caught a lot of people out, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you've hit on a fantastic idea and you grow quite quickly. And that's what happens to a lot of people, especially in this marketplace. They grow quite quickly. But then they focus on the outcome and forget about the component parts of their business. And that creates misalignment, which creates risk in their organization. Look at people like recently in the news, quite popular, Brewdog, Tesla. All those have come foul because they've grown quite quickly. But they've not looked at the rest of the components of their business to make sure that that's also changed to reflect what their strategic position is. So they got caught out with culture because their culture was very much of a startup, all hands on deck. Everyone just does everything, and it's fast, it's furious, and done that. And then as they've grown, they've not looked at it, and it's turned quite toxic. And there's been bullying because they've not done it. And you always find that organisations struggle because they will look at all these elements of the business in isolation to the detriment of the rest, where it should be really, what is our purpose? What are we trying to win at? And then looking at the rest of the organisation to make sure that's aligned to help them fulfil their strategy.
Wow. Mate, there's a lot there. I'm kind of thinking, if I'm listening to this, and it's the first time I've sort of got involved in this whole idea and thinking behind strategy. All the buzzwords aside, like autonomy and strategic alignment and all that sort of stuff, there's an awful lot of common sense, isn't there, in this whole thing?
Yes, and that's the thing that normally I feel like a fraud sometimes, because I'm going and talking to these people and helping organisations, and I've helped organisations from the NHS to Netherrel to smaller enterprises, and sometimes I feel like they're looking at me going, "Yeah, that's obvious, Mike. Cheers." But it's amazing how obvious it is, but it's very rarely happens. Because we get so focused in on the short terms and the BAU that we take our eye off. I love the phrase from the great General McChrystal, which is eyes on, hands off. And I think it's about stepping back from the fog and the BAU and the now. And yes, it's fun.
What do you mean when you say BAU?
Oh, sorry, business as usual type things. Yeah. So delivering, being in the business. And I think it's about stepping back from the fog and taking that wider perspective. And there's a really posh word. It's called organisational and back dexterity. It really
Mate, you get an award for being able to say that. I have no
Yeah.
idea.
But all that means is keeping one eye on the now that you're doing, but also being able to keep one eye on the future. How do you keep that eye so you're not you're keeping that strategic sensitivity to the changes in the environment you operate in, basically, so that you're always are ready to respond rather than react.
Yeah, that's really great. One of the questions that we've got here is, what are the main things that cause friction, right? And so you talked about earlier on, diversion creates fiction. Do you know what I mean? Where people, but I'm sort of listening to you talk and think, are there any other areas then that create fiction? And part of my thinking here is, or part of my question, Mike, is, how do you know if your strategy is right? And can you get friction in effect? Can friction come from having the wrong strategy? You're going down the wrong path. And how do you recognize that and know that?
Ooh, that's a big question there to think about. And I think the first thing is, it really isn't a right or wrong. And it's, of course there is, Mike, because I'm not getting money back. And I suppose it's about strategy is about taking that time to look at the choices and think about where to go. And I think it's really, you'll get that feedback if it's starting to not be the right strategy, because you will ideally not gain the customers that you wanted, that you set out to do. You're not getting that, you're not meeting that need that you identified. So that's where you probably realise that either your strategy is wrong, or you've not quite got the right strategy there, or you haven't got the capability to meet it.
Yeah. And so you said earlier on, didn't you, that strategy actually was iterative. And so it's not set in stone. This is not like Moses putting the 10 Commandments in stone, is it? This is actually a 5-page document which can adapt, and it can move, and it's alive, and I suppose it's responding to what's going on. But at the same time, it's also firm, and it's not immovable, but it's fairly stubborn, I would have thought, strategy.
Yeah, again, it's been very clear on that first thing, isn't it? About once you've identified actually what you're going for, and it's very clear, and that's what you want and need in your organisation. The rest of it is around what you see is the best choice at that time, and things can change in your environment you're operating in. So that makes you more adaptable. People, and that's what you want to do. You want to adapt to meet those changing shifts, so that you can meet your intention, your aim of what you wanted to win at. People tie themselves in knots and make themselves not adaptable by making it so rigid in what they're doing. They're like, no, we've got to do this and then this and then this, and they just tie themselves up in so much priorities and to-do lists and all sorts, that they lose sight of what they're trying to achieve. And I think that's an element that causes friction, is when people lose sight of what they're actually trying to achieve. Who are actually our customers, who are not our customers, and they then get themselves down into this rabbit hole where they're trying to do everything and appease everyone, and you lose sight. And this is what I love about the army, taking some of the stuff from the army, is our number one principles of war is selection and maintenance of that aim. And it's about understanding that as our aim, that is our North Star. How we get there will depend on the shifts that we encounter.
Yeah. Mate, listen, I feel like we could keep going, but I'm aware of time on all of this. Are there any books that you would recommend people read around this whole topic if they want a deep dive?
Yes, I think a great one to look at the top of my head is Playing to Win by strategy. So Roger Martin, I think he's a fantastic person. He makes strategy very simple.
Yeah.
Often people look at me and think you make it sound too simple, that I just ask these choices and that's it. Where's all the work afterwards? But I think Playing to Win is a fantastic book to read. I think looking at it's on my head now. If it's talk about like scenario planning and stuff like that, there's always good books. I'm looking at my
You're looking at your bookshelf now, aren't you? Trying to get some inspiration.
Yeah. I think if you're looking at anything to do with teamwork, I'd look at anything by John Katzenbach.
Yeah.
From him. If you're looking at or Tattenbaum's a good one. So teams that work, Tattenbaum and Salas. I think if you're looking at strategy, maybe a line by Jonathan Trevor, a really good one to look at. There's loads. My girlfriend thinks I've got an obsession with books.
Do you know what I've discovered recently? I've discovered an app. I was just checking actually to see if the book was on it. There's an app called Shortform, which I have on my phone, and it's a bit like Blinkist. It gives you an overview of a book, like a one-page overview, and then it goes into a much more detailed summary of the book, like several pages of detail. And I read that before I decide if I'm now going to get the book, because like you, I've got thousands of them. And I tend to buy books sometimes, and there's books on my shelf I'm sure I've never actually read that. I was full of good intentions when I bought it, but I've not actually read it now. But no, it's good to read. Mike, listen, thanks for your book recommendations, and thanks for being on the show. Really, honestly, fascinating conversation, very different to the conversation we normally have on the e-commerce podcast, but I absolutely enjoyed it. How do people get a hold of you? How do they connect with you if they want to know more, if they want to reach out?
I think reach out. You can get me on email, so mike@lbiconsulting.com, or get me on LinkedIn. I try to be very active on LinkedIn. I love to put my ramblings on there, so please come along and see if you like my ramblings. So I think if you search for Mike Jones, and that's quite a common name, so maybe Mike H. Jones, you'll see me on there. You'll see my picture, which is the same as the one that you showed in your introduction. Yeah. So if you see somebody with a desperate down jaw line with a tie on, that'll probably be me. Or you follow my company page on LinkedIn. So I'm mainly on LinkedIn, which is LBI Consulting. You'll find us on there.
Fantastic. We will, of course, put all the links to Mike's LinkedIn profile, his desperate down jawline, and all of that good stuff in the show notes, which you can get. You can get the show notes, the transcript to download on the website as well. So we'll put all of that in there. Mike, listen, as I said, thoroughly enjoyed this. I feel like I'm just starting to scratch the surface of some quite fascinating stuff. I love to talk about leadership. I love to talk about strategy. You can never in my head talk about it enough. And so really appreciate you coming on to talk to us about it, and genuinely really appreciate your service in the army as well. But really, really thanks.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Matt. I've enjoyed the conversation. Awesome.
Absolute legend. Thanks for being on the show. I'm going to sort out my mouse. Sorry about that. But thank you. We'll definitely get you back soon. But in the meantime, stay safe. Appreciate it, bud.
Thank you. Take care.
Wasn't Mike great? Now, I genuinely love talking to people that served in the military because they have such an insight. We were talking earlier on before we came live about leadership, and we got into a whole separate conversation about leadership and why, for example, the army is so good at leadership, but other public organisations, maybe like the NHS, aren't. And do they invest in leadership as much as the army do, and why don't they? And the differences in understanding there, because Mike's worked with both organisations. Absolutely fascinating. So I kind of get the feeling Mike will be back on the show as we carry on talking about this. I love talking about it. I appreciate if you're just starting out in business, you may be thinking, Matt, what's all this talk about leadership? What's all this talk about strategy? I'm just starting out. Listen, the principles still work. And when you start out, you've got to start somewhere. Everyone starts at the beginning, don't they? And you've got to work your way up the ladder, as it were. And these principles help and they work. So do connect with Mike. Do get in touch with him. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got. Go and enjoy his ramblings on LinkedIn. Such a top guy, and one that served our country for 18 years. So really appreciate that. Now, as I said, all of the notes, all of the transcript from today's show, the notes, the links, all of those kind of things you'll be able to get from our website, ecommercepodcast.net/71. And you'll be able to download those totally free of charge. You don't need to put any email in or any of that kind of jibe or nonsense. You can just enjoy those for free. Now, if you enjoyed today's show, why don't you share it out? Why don't you just comment? Why don't you let us know how you're getting on? Really appreciate your thoughts and ideas. It just helps us connect with more folks around the world. So I think that's it. That's it for me. Thanks for listening to the show. Make sure you come back next week. Next week, actually, the live stream or the live recording of this show is going out on Monday because I couldn't do it last week. So the next live stream is actually on Thursday in a few days' time. So we've got another great guest coming onto the show. So make sure you connect with us so you can find out what's going on. Subscribe to the podcast, all the usual call to action stuff that I'm supposed to tell you at the end of these podcasts. I'm sure you know it all by heart. I'm sure you've heard it all 1,000 times already, but you know what to do. That's all from me. Thanks for being part of the show. I will see you again next time. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the E-Commerce Podcast with Matt Edmondson. Join us next time for more interviews, tips, and tools for building your business online.